Subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to press the bell icon to get all the latest updates.
Hello and welcome everybody. This is the Mojo Story and I am Barkha Dutt. This is the digital platform that brings you the biggest newsmakers and the biggest issues from across the globe. And today it is my privilege and honor to introduce a woman I have long admired and actually known for several decades as well. We're talking today about one of the most inspiring, powerful and influential women in the world. And let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, who is just out with her absolutely fascinating memoirs, her journey of how she got to this point. I'm talking, of course, about Indra Nooyi and her memoirs called My Life in Full, talking about her work, her family, and of course, our collective future as women. As she said, everything in this book comes from My Life in Full, which is the title of that book. Indra Nooyi, of course, has most recently been the head of PepsiCo, both its CEO and its chairperson, but she has continued to exercise an inordinate amount of influence for women across the world, in particular here in India. That photograph is one for the albums, her first day at PepsiCo with the then CEO, Wayne Calloway, a position that she would work her way into. Isn't that an extraordinary moment? Nooyi, of course, writes an extremely candid and personal and intimate memoir, and there you see one of those photographs from her family album. It's a book that I encourage all of you to pick up and read if you want to know the story of one of, as I said, the most successful women of our time, who said women have to establish gravitas in a world where authority and brilliance will often look like an older man. Well, if there's anyone who's taught us how to break that proverbial glass ceiling and also reminded us that it can often be a work in progress for all of our lives, it is Indra Nooyi. Let's bring her up on the program today as we welcome her to the Mojo Story and talk about her fascinating memoirs. And in the course of this conversation, we'll also be talking to other women, very successful women leaders who have been lucky enough to have been mentored by Ms. Nooyi. Welcome, Indra. It's great to see you after all of these years. And, you know, one of the most lovely moments in the book for me, because I know you're in Connecticut right now, is how you write about getting onto this plane for the first time, leaving for the United States, a nerdy girl. That's how you describe yourself, a nerdy girl in Madras, as it was then known, getting onto this 24-hour plane journey and a stranger very helpfully telling you how to pronounce Connecticut, where you are today. And the book tells us that as someone who hadn't had that exposure to the US before, you didn't even know how to say Connecticut properly. And look, from there to now, what an extraordinary journey.
First of all, Barkha, it's wonderful to see you again. And thank you for having me on your show. And thank you for those wonderful opening comments. I must say, if I sort of draw a line between where I was born and brought up to where I ended up in my professional career as CEO of an iconic American company, I feel like pinching myself. Just feels unreal. But, again, it's happened. Thank God it turned out okay. And it's now time to do two things. One, reflect back on my life and derive the lessons from that reflection so other people can learn from it and benefit from it. But also for myself, I'm thinking about what to do in the future in terms of giving back to women, giving back to young family builders so that they don't have to go through the struggles and the challenges that I did. So I'm looking at this chapter of my life with great excitement. And, it's been quite a journey to reflect back on my life.
Yeah, it's been an extraordinary journey. And the book actually begins with your life in Madras, now Chennai, that swing, the jhula, as we call it in Hindi, in your home, the Charles Dickens novels that you and your sister read, and a somewhat disciplinarian mother who continued to be a disciplinarian, who insisted that if your sister, for example, wanted to go and get an MBA, she first had to get married.
I got to tell you, she's a remarkable woman. She's still here with us, and she still is a person who's got one foot on the brake and one foot on the accelerator. She couldn't go to college. She was brilliant, but she didn't go to college. And I think she lived her life vicariously through the daughters. Society demanded that she have one foot on the brake, but deep down inside, she had one foot on the accelerator. So she had to live within societal norms, yet allow her children to soar. She was helped by the fact that the men in our family, my grandfather, my father, all believed in equality for the boys and girls in the family, which helped us a lot. So she would struggle with imposing those societal requirements at the same time, basically giving us a wink and a nod and saying, go do whatever you have to do. It's a challenge for her. I think she played that part brilliantly. But and both my sister and I were beneficiaries of that. But I've got to say, mom was just a tour de force in our life.
Yeah, and I can, it's a fascinating description. A mom who has her foot on the accelerator and brake simultaneously, and I suspect that's really true for so many mothers across the globe. Another lovely story. I don't want to give away everything about the book because I do want our audience to read it. But some of the standout moments. You start working in India, and you work with Johnson and Johnson, and you've got to explain to male bosses why the company needs a different kind of sanitary pad, right? And this is at a time when no one actually has conversations about menstruation. We still have sanitary pads that are called whisper, kind of suggesting, the opacity around bleeding and the monthly period. And you're having to tell all these men why the company needs a different kind of product. Can you speak back to those times?
Interestingly, when I was a product manager for Stay Free, the tables were turned the other way. Because when I joined J&J, Johnson & Johnson was bringing Stay Free from the US to launch in India. Most of the senior leaders were men, and they believed in giving women a freedom during their monthly period. So I didn't have to convince them. They were convincing me to go fast to launch this because they believed this product would liberate women. My boss, C.V. Shah at Johnson & Johnson, was a very enlightened leader. And he had both Carefree and Stay Free. And he said, look, Carefree is a belted napkin, but it's a moment of liberation for women by itself. But Stay Free takes it to a whole new level. So here he was telling me, go faster, launch it faster. The sooner we can get it to the market, the sooner we can convince mothers to make that expenditure outlay for their daughters, the better off our young girls will be. And so I had the reverse opportunity, which is, go as fast as I can, because my male bosses were all giving me the tailwinds to actually implement a program that would help women. So it was an enlightened time, Barkha.
That's good to know. And then you cut to this, an afternoon where you're sitting in the American library, not just because you like reading, but because the air conditioning is better, on afternoons which are too sweltry for Indians to stay at home. And you see a little sort of notice that talks about a management program at Yale, and the rest, as they say, is history. You take a loan to basically go and do your first sort of stint outside India. Do you remember what was going through your heart when you were on that flight, other than listening to the Bee Gees on loop?
I was very excited about coming to the United States because everything we heard, read about the US was seat of innovation, seat of culture, seat of music, theater, the arts. So I was so excited about coming to the United States or going to the United States. On the other hand, the first time I was leaving the country. So I was scared, really scared. I was scared about leaving my family, hoping they would all be there for me when I came back to visit. And it was one of those mixed feelings. But I'd say on balance, it was one of excitement and looking forward to what the future held for me.
Yeah. And, one of the reasons that your life and this book is so important is how you underline that women and paid work is critical to the growth and the happiness of women. And that the fact that this is still debated is sort of dismaying. And yet, Indira, when you talk about your life as a parent, even you succumb to the guilt of the working mom. You talk about afternoons where your assistant Barbara has to step in, how your younger daughter is more sensitive, how she writes you that little note saying, I love you again if if you come back home. That wrestling with that guilt, when do you think women will be free from it? And how much do you think it holds women back?
Well, the guilt is going to be there. I think it's in our DNA. It's programmed into our DNA. The problem is, it's a perfection. It's a perfection gene problem. We want to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter, the perfect daughter-in-law, the perfect executive. We want to be perfect at everything, not recognizing that each of these are full-time jobs. Just to do the job, they're full-time jobs. To be perfect at them is more than a full-time job. And we only have 24 hours in the day. So we have to think very carefully about all this and say, what can we take on? What's our bandwidth? What can we take on? What can we be good at? What do we have to say we're not going to do? And recognize that whatever we choose not to do, we're either going to feel like we failed because we couldn't do it, or we missed out because we couldn't participate in it. The time has come for us to pause and say, we're human. We can only do the following things. For some, we can build a support system. For the rest, we just cannot do it at all. So let's prioritize. We have to start getting to that. But one key thing that has to happen, Barkha, we have to get our partners to support us. I have a very supportive spouse. And we approached life as equal partners. Many women do not have a supportive spouse. I think it's critically important that the husband and wife have the conversation with each other, that they both are in it together, and make sure that the families of both sides also realize that they're going to have to step in to help the young couple, because it's not possible to juggle all these priorities and not have something drop and then feel like crap when it drops.
Yeah, I think, as Hillary Clinton said, it takes a village, but this business of being super women, and it's something that's romanticized in our movies, in our advertisements. I actually call them chains of gold. I think women set an impossible standard for themselves, for ourselves.
Because you have so many priorities, it does become impossible, because every one of them requires a basic level of performance, right? Otherwise, there are problems. Here's the issue. Why is it that all of those responsibilities fall on the woman? I think there are responsibilities that are individual. There are responsibilities that are the collective being the family and your support structure. I think you've got to build the support structure. You've got to build the family support. If you don't do that, it becomes an individual responsibility. And I'll be honest with you, it is impossible to navigate through all of that individually. It's not human to navigate all of them individually. So you have to think through this very carefully.
I remember interviewing Melinda Gates once, who said that one of the ways that she tried to get around the fact that there was double pressure on women, pressure at work and pressure at home, was by instituting policies like family leave. So she moved from maternity leave and paternity leave to family leave. And we had a very interesting conversation about how there will never be equality for women at work unless there is equality for women at home. I know you write a lot about this in your book. You write about your husband being very supportive, your in-laws stepping in, your mother stepping in, the entire support system. What happens to women who don't have the support system? Where do they go?
Well, I agree for that, because I know that many people don't have that support system. And it hurts to hear about people who don't have the support system. 2 or 3 things need to happen. First, I think we have to have national childcare systems to help women who want to be in paid work and still want to have families. And we want people to have families. There's wonderful joys in motherhood, and we need young people to keep the population at the replacement rate. So I laud people who want to have families, but I think that we almost have to build a support structure of flexible working so that we can do remote working and on-site working along with childcare. It's critically important we set up quality childcare that's available and affordable, so young family builders can avail themselves of the childcare. Second, I think with an aging population, we might want to think about how we have in communities older people helping younger people with supervising childcare workers. Because, in the old days, I think of all our doors open, kids would come in the middle of the courtyards, and the elders would sit and watch them play and keep an eye out for them. We have to go back to those days. Maybe it's utopian, but we have to go back to a time when we have community trust again. We have to go back to a time when there was multi-generational involvement in bringing up kids. There was intergenerational responsibility. I think that the world is changing, Barkha, and we need women, we need kids, and if we don't provide a support structure, we're going to have problems downstream. Somebody once said that, all of the fruits that we harvest today were from trees that were planted 20 years ago. We need to plant new trees today so that people downstream can benefit.
And of course, for this, women have to support other women. And I know that you are a mentor to so many women across the globe, and we'll be meeting two of them in just a moment from now. But talking about this intergenerational difference, there's this story in the book, and because I've known you for so many years, I had some sense of the story about how you come home from the biggest professional development of your life. You are about to tell your family that you are going to be the next president of PepsiCo. And you come home and your mother scolds you as if you were still a little child and says to you, you forgot to bring the milk today. And you say to her, why can't Raj do it, talking about your husband? And she says he's very tired. And you go storm off, you get the milk, you come back, you slam it on the counter and you say, I wanted to tell you I'm going to be the next president of PepsiCo. And your mom says?
She says, leave the crown in the garage. When you enter the house, you're the wife, the daughter, the mother. Just worry about those jobs. Nobody else can take your place. Leave your crown in the garage. Now, I have to tell you, at that point, it hurt. Because at that point, I wanted her to focus on me and sort of make me feel like I was awesome. But her point is simple. Her point is, that's all great, but nobody else can take your place, and please have some humility when you come home, because there's a lot of people here who are depending on you. So my mother, I think, gave me a very, very valuable lesson saying, at the workplace, you can have your foot on the accelerator. When you come home, please don't treat us as your employees. Please put a little brake on that car and just let's get into a groove where we're a family, where we're just more normal as, parents and husband and wife and kids. I think she was right, Barkha, because very often we want to wear our crown to the house and we sort of order people around as if they're all our employees. I think we have to get to a point where husbands and wives both don't wear a crown into the house. Both take their crowns off in the garage and come home and say, we're now in a completely different environment. And let's figure out how to just wind down and just be ourselves and relax at home.
I mean, I'd agree with you if men were also asked to leave their crowns in the garage, but that's not often the case. Men are often sort of allowed to bring their crowns home, while women are expected to leave their crowns in the garage.
I think that's what has to change. I think my mother grew up in a different time, and that was a time when the ideal worker was a male, and so they did wear the crown in the garage. From the front, they brought the crown into the home. And even if they didn't have a crown, we put a crown on them. But that's okay. Times have changed. I think now both are working, both are bringing a paycheck. And the time has come to say, don't both wear a crown in the house. Both of you leave it in the garage or wherever you want to leave it at the workplace and then come home, because the workplaces are getting more stressful. The home life is getting more stressful because of all of the changes happening in the world around us. Let us quieten down life at home so that we don't have all the stresses that we have outside the home. Let's make the home a stress-free, more easy place to interact and sort of de-stress, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, but I'm still curious to know, and I know I deal with some of this in my own life with younger colleagues. What are some of the cross-generational conversations? What are the things that women across generations agree on, and what are some of the things we don't agree on? And and how do women support other women? And I want to also now bring on this broadcast two very special guests. They're both totally A-lister women in their own rights, in their own spaces, doing great work. And let me first introduce Anjula. Let's bring Anjula Acharia into our stream. There's Anjula, and a lot of you already would know Anjula. Anjula is a very, very successful CEO of an investment and management company, an important sort of investor working out of the United States of America. And I think a lot of our audience would already be familiar with her work. I know I am. And also I want to welcome to the program Navya Nanda. Navya Nanda is someone who has done that extraordinary thing of carving out her own space separate from that of her very famous family. She has in fact worked in women's health in particular, and is the co-founder of Aara Health, which is devoted to actually picking up many taboos around women's health and shining a light on them. So welcome, Anjula and Navya. It's great to have both of you on. And I know that both of you in different capacities at different stages of your life have, known Indra well and closely. And I know you can tell us stuff about her that we don't know, perhaps that we don't even get to know from the book. So Anjula, let's start with you. I mean, I think it's quite fair to say that Indra broke all of those barriers before so many of us could even dream of doing it. In terms of how that has influenced you, inspired you, also in terms of how you've watched her battle, because if you read the memoirs, you know that there have been tough phases getting onto a weekend flight to Moscow, not being able to show up for your child's gig at school, right? Having to be that superwoman that she's urging women not to be, having been one herself. So Anjula, speak a little bit about when you first met Indira and how that relationship has evolved and how she has shaped you.
Yeah. Well, first off, I'd just like to say I watched Indra from afar for many, many years, and she was a huge inspiration to me as a businesswoman. But it wasn't just as a businesswoman, also just in my creative world. Like, obviously, you may know that I launched Priyanka Chopra in America. And watching someone like Indra make that move and cross all of those barriers and break a path for herself in business really gave me the courage and belief that I could break that path for Priyanka in entertainment. So in my mind, she's the first South Asian woman that's kind of broken that path and that barrier and really pushed the door open and allowed all of us to come in after her. So just that inspiration was a lot for me. And I've never even said this to Indra, but like I said, I watched her from afar for many years. And then I was lucky enough to be on this, I think it was a Forbes article that was talking about, South Asian women in America that you should know. And I was one of the people on that list. And obviously Indra was the star on that list. And I was just like shocked and amazed that I got to be on a list with Indra. And I showed the whole world this list, by the way. It was like an amazing moment for me. And actually that's through that to someone that worked at PepsiCo that's a friend of mine then introduced Indra and I. And the amazing thing about Indra, and I say this in front of you, Indra, is that, so I'll tell you how we met and then it will explain what I want to say. So as she was being honored at a really big event, and she asked my friend to invite me to this event. And I was just shocked to get an invite. And I thought that, we would be in the back somewhere sitting like far away. And I didn't even think I'd get to speak to her because it was like, I feel like there were like probably like 600 people at this event in New York City. And at some point, I don't know how I got to Indra, but she got to me, but she grabbed my hand and she didn't let go. And she introduced me to her daughters and she talked about the work that I'd done with Priyanka actually. And then she came over to our table later and she sat and she spoke to me and I just felt so like, someone had like, I don't know, shone this huge light on me, just the fact that she'd sort of given me this attention. And I don't know how it happened, but from then we came to her house for lunch and she made me dosas and actually me and Priyanka, she made us homemade dosas. And then I saw this whole other side to Indra, which was like this incredible mother and wife and sister and everything, And so I've had this beautiful moments with her, but it's been a really interesting journey. what I wanted to say, I'm sure you have questions, but one thing I wanted to make sure that I said was just that, the most inspiring thing about Indra for me, I invest in companies, I invest in mainly women. So 90% of my investments are women startup entrepreneurs who I'm helping to build as CEOs. And what I saw was Indra build, I think it's 9 or 10 CEOs out of PepsiCo that have gone on to become CEOs of huge conglomerates. And whenever I get to see her, I always want that sort of those nuggets for me to pass on to my CEOs. And the CEOs I work with are much smaller companies, but the idea is that those companies become huge companies that, either Pepsi are going to buy or they're going to IPO or, a big CPG. So what's been the most amazing thing is like being somebody that mentors CEOs at a very different level is to spend time with someone that's mentored so many CEOs that have gone on to be, huge successes.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. But in the meantime, never discount what a dosa can do. I'm thinking of Mindy Kaling and Kamala Harris in the run up to Kamala becoming vice president. But Navya, you're the youngest of all of us, and I don't mean to say that in any sort of condescending way, except out of curiosity. I want to know: do you sort of look at women in our varying generations and kind of say, hey, our generation is totally different? Talk a little bit first about, being a mentee to Indra Nooyi, and, what you probably learned from her that you wouldn't have had you not been mentored by her.
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for, having me here. And it's quite refreshing and rewarding to be introduced for your own successes and merits for once. So I truly appreciate that. And I think it's a surreal feeling for me to even be sitting here and talking about her, and almost a surreal feeling that she knows who I am. And
yes.
I think it's still something that I haven't processed completely, that, she knows who I am, she knows my name. But I think how we first met was through an advisor on my startup, Aara Health, who, is a close friend of hers. And when he posed the idea that, I feel that you four girls should have a conversation with, Indra, we were like, are you sure she's going to speak to us? And we felt that, she probably wouldn't have the time to, even give us 30 minutes to kind of talk about it. But I think just the fact that she replied within 5 minutes of our email going out to her, I was like, wow, okay, so she's agreed to speak to us. And I remember the night before we got onto that Zoom call, I don't think any of us slept. We were worried about what we were going to say, what if we would even be able to speak in front of her. We were in no position to even, speak to her, but even start talking to her about the work we were doing. Because honestly, we just wanted to hear about everything she had done and learn from her. But I think something that I've, grown up watching her do, and also after interacting with her, I feel is that, when you look at someone in her position, and for a young girl my age, in her 20s, you always think that, okay, this is something unattainable in my lifetime. This is not something that I will ever be able to achieve. But I think that she paints a very honest and transparent picture, not just of her journey as a leader, but as a mother, as a daughter, which gives us hope that, if we can make those mistakes and still get to where she is. And I think it's that I've taken away from her, is a transparency and honesty, because I know that she gave an interview once where somebody asked her that, do you feel that women can do it all? And she very honestly said no. And I think that it's okay for us to understand that, we may not be able to do it all, but I think watching her speak about that with such honesty gives us younger girls who aspire to be just like her hope that, okay, we can achieve that someday. But I think she's not just been an inspiration to me, but probably not just women as well, but probably every Indian, I would say, because of, where she represents us. And I feel proud to know that we have someone like her out there representing us.
Yeah, you actually read my mind, because I was remembering when you were speaking that interview, Indra, when you said women cannot have it all. And look at that photograph. That's you with the PepsiCo CEO. You became that CEO. And I mean, even today, like you said, you have to pinch yourself. What is it that you would have wanted that you haven't got? When you said women can't have it all, what do you not have? I mean, looking from afar, you have it all.
Yeah, so before I get to that, can I just say something about Ange and
Yes,
Navya?
of course.
I'll tell you something. When I look at Anjula and Navya, they represent two different future generations. I feel great about the future of the world because I know Anjula as a lovely person, but I know her as a investor manager extraordinaire. Um, I think she's done a brilliant job with how she manages Priyanka. Really fantastic. And with so much passion and heart devoted to making Priyanka the biggest brand she can be. And then the eye that she has for investing. This woman has got contacts. She has a sense for cultural trends and for beverage and food trends. And she invests very, very cleverly, has great returns. So I look at Ange and go, man, I'm learning from Anjula rather than teaching Anjula. Navya, I've got to tell you, when I agreed to mentor these four girls who are running Aara Health, their proposition was a terrific proposition. And it's a proposition that suited the Indian zeitgeist. You know, we believe in all of these Ayurvedic homeopathic treatments. They were taking phytochemicals and figuring out how to give it in the diet. I just loved what the four were doing. Dedicated, hardworking. What I loved is after every meeting, writing action items, following up, coming back to me about the progress they've made. I had no idea who Navya Nanda was when I was mentoring her. So I just saw her as this extraordinary business person, but very young. And I'm thinking to myself, I wish I had her maturity when I was her age. I didn't. So I look at these two people and I say, the world is in good hands because if there are more Anjulas and more Navyas, we can all sit back and say, good, we can reap the benefits of these future generations that are going to be working. So I wanted to make sure I said that.
But I just wanted to say, of course, you're right, but it also takes a generous leader to recognize talent in others, right? And I think that is what leadership is about. And there are too few people like you. There are many people who just hold on to the last bit of profile, the last bit of spotlight, that crown that you spoke about. You know, people aren't willing to share the crown. And of course, Anjula and Navya are fantastic at what they do, but it is also your spirit that recognizes that they're fantastic.
But
Go ahead, Ange.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something there because when you were talking earlier, I'd written some notes of things I wanted to say. And the thing that Indra really taught me and is when to put the crown down. That's so like, for example, when I'm mentoring my CEOs, it's not about me. It's nothing to do with me. It's about them. And when she's mentoring people, she puts her crown down because it's not about her. It's about them. And that is really an amazing thing to be able to do. Like you said, that's an amazing gift. And I think that the other thing I was thinking about was, as you both were talking earlier, was just about this multi-generational family and community. The other thing that Indra has mastered and knows is community and family. I know people that work at Pepsi, so I know the way they speak about her. And, very much about the way she runs when she ran that company was about thinking about multi-generational, thinking about how you sort of almost treat it as one big family, how people feel, part of a bigger cause. Like, Indra was so successful. I talked about this at my CEO conference that she so kindly spoke at when I was working for a venture fund, and was really about how the portfolio had moved so significantly from, basically fun for you products, which are full of sugar and obviously very criticized, to more healthier products like Quakers and, some of the things that are much better for you. And the way she just sees things, it's very about how we're gonna think about multi-generational, how we're gonna think about the generations after us, both when it comes to agriculture, when it comes to people's healthiness and livelihoods, but also just this whole family thing that she also talks about in her family. I think it's just so interesting the way it's all intertwined, the way she sort of sees the world in that way.
Yeah. And what I want to ask you, and Indra, you haven't answered my question, but I'm going to ask Navya a question and then take it back to you, is, a lot of times successful women want to shrug off their gender. I know I went through this as a journalist when, someone would say, a woman war correspondent. And I just say, well, I'm a war correspondent. Or, a woman journalist. And I'd say I'm a journalist. But as I got older, I recognized that my gender had been a big part of my struggle, a big part of my identity. And I do not discard it in the way that I felt the need to when I was in my 20s or even in my 30s. So, Navya, what is the place of being female in your identity and your approach to your work?
I think for us, and especially this generation, we haven't grown up with the expectation that there really isn't anything that we as women can't do. We don't have those biases. We've not grown up around those stigmas or those taboos. And I've grown up in a household where I have, a working grandmother, working mother. So I've really grown up watching them do everything, whether that's balance their family life, whether that's, be a successful leader or a businesswoman. So for me, it was never a doubt in my mind. And I think I speak for most young girls my age that, that my gender would come in the way of my career or the goals that I want to achieve. And I think we've grown up with the mindset that, we really can do everything. And I don't think that has played a big role in stopping us from putting ourselves out there, whether as a CEO or even as a daughter, to really go out there and achieve. So I would say that maybe that was something the generation before us felt, that they had to balance their identity as a woman in the workplace. But I think we've grown up in a very, very different context of not having to feel that at all. And I actually remember the first ever conversation we had with Indra, and actually the advisor who introduced us was the only man on the call, and he made a comment saying that, I feel like the odd one out. And she replied saying, well, now you know how we feel. And
I remember. Nice.
That moment made me realize that things are changing. We are outnumbering the men, and we are outnumbering what we believe to be outnumbered earlier. So that was a great sense.
That's brilliant to hear, and it's in fact, I think it's lovely, because you realize that there is value to having female leadership and having female mentors, and it makes all the difference. So Indra, here are my two questions. One, what is it that you don't have when you say women can't have it all? And the second, how much of being female influenced how you ran, let's say, a company like PepsiCo, when you moved to not just healthier products, but let's say little things that you did which was so unusual, like writing letters to the parents of your leadership team. I mean, I don't know that anyone had done that before. So how much has being female impacted your style of leadership? And what is it that you don't have when you tell us that we can't have it all?
Yeah. So I know lots of other female CEOs, and I'm not sure that whatever I was doing was necessarily female, because none of them would do it. I think there was a different sensibility and sensitivity that I had, because I looked at each of my leaders as assets for the company. And I felt that I had to engage those assets head, heart, and hands. Typically in companies, we engage their head, we engage their hands, and then we forget that they have a heart. I wanted them to feel completely committed to the company and have a sense of loyalty towards the company that was unprecedented, so that they remained at PepsiCo and gave it their best. And I thought the best way to do it is make their families also feel part of the company. So I'd write to the spouses. Then when I saw people congratulating my mother for me becoming CEO, I realized I needed to congratulate and thank their parents too for giving me the gift of their child to contribute so much to PepsiCo. So I started writing those letters from my heart. I didn't write it as it's just a routine thing. They were personalized. They had great words about their child. It was always a positive report card. Remember, the kids were in the C-suite. And I have to tell you, it's not a female thing, because after I did that and other people began to hear about it, many men started to write letters to the parents of their senior executives. And I'd get notes back saying, you will not believe what's happened. I've got my employees feeling even more committed to the company than they did before. Somebody else said, the parents are so emotional about their child working for the company. If their son or daughter wanted to ever leave the company, the parents would come down upon them like a ton of bricks to say, there's no way you can leave this company. Your CEO and I are friends. And so I think it built a different sort of a relationship between the company and the employee. And I think we need to build those bonds between people, because we spend so much of our waking time at work, so much of our waking time. And it can't be something you just go, leave yourself at the door, and then pick yourself up when you leave. And so I think it's important we think of workplaces as a emotional collection point too, not just a unemotional, get your work done and leave. And that's what prompted me to do what I did in terms of writing letters. But in terms of what I have and don't have, materially, I have everything I want. It's not a material issue. There are times I want to be home with the kids and I can't. There are times I want to work and I can't because I've got commitments at work. There are times I'd love to go on a vacation with my husband, but I've got commitments at work and I've got kids. I can't just take off on vacation. There are days that I just want to kick my feet up and go sit in a spa for a whole week and shut off every device so that nobody can reach me. But I know that's not practical. Maybe I could do it now, but those days I couldn't do it because the kids were young, they needed me. So I think we all have to sit down and not talk about, oh my God, I can't have my week of vacation. Oh my God, I didn't have my date night with my husband. Stop talking about what you didn't have. Talk about what you have and make the best of what you have in front of you. Make the best of your life. That's all you can do. But if you start off saying, I wasn't perfect at A or B or C, or I didn't have time to do my binge watching, hey, tough luck. Life is not perfect for anybody. Anybody.
I mean, I was going to say that men also wrestle with these dilemmas, but certainly not in the same way, right? And I think all we can hope for is to get to a point where there's a level playing field. I'm just curious to know how much has changed, Anjula. I heard Navya saying nothing is impossible. We didn't grow up with that, or with that sort of, those barriers that all of you did. How has it been for you, especially as an investor? Like, of course, Priyanka Chopra has been a fantastic sort of success story, professional success story, not just for Priyanka, but also for you. But in terms of investing in women CEOs, what are the hurdles that you come across? What has been the toughest thing for you as a female investor, but also someone who's actually investing in women CEOs?
Yeah, the biggest challenge, I think, is that, it's like 3% of venture capital goes to women. So it's still a really, really small number of venture capital that goes to women. So I think most of the women CEOs that I work with struggle with that piece, right? But it's interesting. I just lean to what Indra says. It's like when the female CEOs come to me and they say, oh my God, Ange, it's going to be so hard. We want to raise money. Only 3% of venture capital goes to women. I say, I don't want you to listen to the news. I don't want you to read this rhetoric. Like, I was an immigrant. I came from England. I came to Silicon Valley. I raised $6 million for my first company, and I raised it in a matter of days. You know why? Because I wasn't thinking about only 3% of women could get venture capital and only this amount of women got this and these are the opportunities. I just went in like guns blazing, saying, I know what I want for myself and I'm going to go and get it. And, this is the amazing thing about having someone like Indra in my purview is like, I can just look at her and go, well, nothing stopped her. She didn't see all the stats around only X percentage of women became CEOs of like huge American conglomerates, or she wasn't focused on any of that. She was just focused on what she could do and how she could build. So yeah, I think the challenges are there for sure. But like I said, I just don't let anyone read the rhetoric. I don't let anyone focus on that. I had one of my companies, Catherine Minshew, she's the founder of The Muse. She said to me on a train from Palo Alto to San Francisco, I'm just going to go away and raise a few more, like, just a couple of 100,000, from friends and family. I said, Catherine, we're going to go and raise a $10 million round. I said, the amount of time and effort it's going to take you to raise 200,000 is going to be the same as you raising 10 million. I was like, we're going to go and do it, and I'm going to be there with you. So I think it's just like taking what Indra said, just that sort of gumption and that heart and that passion, and just saying, I'm going to go for it, and I'm not going to listen to the rhetoric.
So what I'm loving about what I'm hearing, and I want to ask both you and Indra about this, and then I'll come to Navya. One of the big cliches is that women have an uncomfortable relationship with money. That we know how to do everything, but we don't know how to say, "Give me money." Anjula, since you spoke so sort of ambitiously about raising money, did you ever have to cross that mental block?
Do you know what? I got this advice from this investor very early on, and I've taken this advice for myself and all my CEOs, is if you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money. So I always tell all my CEOs, we're not asking for money ever. We're going to go and inspire people. We're going to go and evangelize about the space that we're in. And then we're going to ask for advice. Let me tell you, every single time we've got money.
Well, I think I should follow that trick. Indra, before I come to Navya, the book is so candid, it's so honest, and I think that's really the point. Like, you don't present a perfect portrait. You present those moments of guilt, you present those moments of sadness. What do you look back as the toughest moment for you to get to where you are. That when you're very candidly talking to Anjula, to me, to Navya, you'll tell us, listen, I'm telling you now, this is going to happen to you.
Toughest moment for me?
Yeah.
I mean, look, a lot of the hurdles that I had to cross, these young people don't have to. Because when I was coming into the workforce, I was the only woman in the room. Now, as Navya said, we were 5 women, and poor Arun was the only guy there and was feeling uncomfortable. I was just putting on a show of being uncomfortable, I should say. But the world is changing. I think the world is changing to be more accepting and accommodating of many more women in the workplace. But even more interesting, the women are wicked smart. They're getting all the top grades. They are really graduating in large numbers. So we're talking about women who are extraordinary and are going to make the biggest contributions to the future of business, to the future of government, to the future of nonprofits, to the future of entrepreneurship over the next few years. So I think we all have to start getting used to the fact that this is not a female group we're talking about. We're talking of a high-performing, highly qualified group of people that are going to help move the economy forward. So we've got to think of them in terms of as an economist, not as a feminist. So we've got to say for the economy, we need all of these people really contributing to the bettering the world. So I think the world has changed, Barkha, for all women going into the future. Some of the family pressures haven't changed, but the world has changed in terms of welcoming women into the workforce. Now we have to change the support systems around them so that they can also have, enjoy the joys of motherhood and family, as well as contribute to the benefit of the economy.
I mean, equality at home is critical, of course, but Indra, I just have to push you a little bit on your argument and even Navya's argument that everything is, pretty hunky-dory. And I remember Hillary Clinton saying to me once that, that she lived by Eleanor Roosevelt's motto that if you're a successful woman and if you're a successful woman with a mind of your own, you have to develop a skin as thick as the hide of a rhinoceros. So, I'm just wondering whether you had to do that. Did you have to develop a really thick hide, Indra?
Oh, constantly. Look, being hunky-dory doesn't mean that everything has become fine. It's all relative. Versus where we were to now, it's a big change. Remember, when I became CEO, there were hardly any women CEOs. There were 3 or 4 other women CEOs. So we've gone from there to about 25, 30 women CEOs. Okay, it's a glacial progress, but it's progress. In many, many jobs, we've gone from 10% women to 40% women. So I think that we are making progress. So I think in those metrics, we are doing way better than we did many, many years ago. Second, there's actually now a way for women to express the problems in the workplace. Sexual harassment, being treated differently, pay parity. There's actually a forum now where people can talk about it, and people think that it's okay to surface these issues. In the past, we couldn't do that. So I celebrate all of these changes and improvements and say, guys, I know it's not going at the pace we'd like, but it's still making improvement. Let's band together and start to make the right changes going forward, not because it's just a female issue and we have to do it. We have to do it for the sake of the economy. We have to do it because it's the right thing to move any country or community forward. It's the right thing to move families forward.
Absolutely. I have a couple of minutes left, but I want to come back to you, Navya, who said that, you said you have grown up in a completely different context. Yet when you launched Aara Health and you started looking at issues of health, I'm sure you came across what an unequal world it is for so many women who are outside of our circle of privilege, right? So what was it that struck you that, I remember when I did my first news story, and I remember sort of doing the story of the gang rape of a Dalit woman. Until then, my feminism was some completely sort of privileged textbook feminism till I came across this. I stepped out of my world and I saw this is what women go through. So I'm just wondering what has been the process of discovery for you and how you dovetail that back to the kind of mentoring experience you've had with Indra.
I think in the field that I am in, especially women's healthcare is not a market or an area that was heavily focused on in India before. And we felt, as for young women, that healthcare is a fundamental right, not just to men, but to women as well. And we wanted to give women an opportunity and a safe space to seek the answers that they wanted, make more informed decisions about their bodies. And it's, people often ask us that, you four come from very privileged backgrounds. So at what point did you realize that this was an inequality in your country? And I always say to people that, if we continue living in our bubbles, then we will never really know what's going on outside of it. And I think it's when the four of us really observed what was going on around us, not just in the context of interacting with our friends who were talking to us about not being able to have certain conversations at home with their mothers about very important topics, or even our own experiences as young girls in school having no form of sexual health education, no sanitary pads in the toilets, simply going to the mall, to a restaurant and not having access to a sanitary pad. These were things that not just women from underprivileged communities, but even the four of us had experienced. So we knew that if the four of us coming from where we do have this issue, then we couldn't even begin to imagine what that looked like for people who didn't have the opportunities that we did. And I think it's at that point we realized that it was our responsibility, because we've essentially are responsible for building this world that we talk about creating. And if us as young women can't give back to the other young women in our country, then we've done a big disservice. So that was where the idea of this really came from. A lot of personal experience, a lot of observation, and a lot of also wanting to change the context and give other young girls never that opportunity of feeling ashamed by getting their first period in a classroom, but actually feeling empowered by it, because it's a great life-changing experience. And we didn't want other young girls to feel that way.
And it's so important because actually often in rural India, girls drop out of school because there's no access to sanitary pads. So it's directly linked to education. Anjula, what has been your sort of moment which you look back at as your big learning moment? Or sometimes it's an unlearning moment, right? Sometimes you've got to dump what you used to think to embrace like a completely different way of thinking.
Yeah, I think, I grew up in England. I'm here right now. And, me and my brother were talking about this the other day. I think it's really just coming from cultures that, like Indra was really lucky, like her parents. And it's funny, I noticed the same. I only realized this today, Indra, but the way your mother raised you is very similar to the way Priyanka's mother raised her, like to push and debate back and all of that. And I don't know that, I think for me, I came from England. It was a very different culture. South Asians were seen very differently in the UK. They were seen as working class. You go into Heathrow Airport, you see all the Asians working there. They're running the grocery stores. And then, 20 years ago, I moved to America, into Silicon Valley, and I was seen completely different. I was now seen as this British woman with an English accent who was Indian, who was very educated, or probably very educated. And I was just seen so differently by the community there that I walked in and I raised, $6 million, as I said, very quickly. And I was like, oh my God, people just see me very differently. And I think that the thing that I sort of really learned is to think really big, and not to let somebody else's opinion of you or where you come from or your family or the color of your skin or whatever to define you. And only you can define you, And I mean, Indra's just the perfect example of that. She's defined herself in America. She came, I told Indra when I started reading the book, I was in tears at the beginning. Like randomly, she called me just as I started reading it. And she was like, oh, what do you think? And I said, well, I only just started, but I'm already crying. And I was just crying because I really related to the background that she came from and just the knowing who she's become. I was like, well, I still have a whole journey to continue on yet, but like the sky's the limit, So I think it's just thinking big and just knowing that nobody can define you, only you can.
The book really, Indra, last word to you, it is extremely moving. And, the passage where you talk about like cutting out grocery coupons to get a good deal, there's also been that stage in your life when you had to go for the sort of the bargain buys at the supermarkets, right? So it really is your life in full and you have revealed it all. I just want to close with this sense of that multicultural background. All three of you are global in different ways, right? You're So there's the Indian story or the Asian, South Asian story. But for you, Indra, I know there's that lovely moment where both Barack Obama and Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was then Prime Minister, wanted to claim you as their own. And you are really both, right? And I think there's this beautiful line in your book which says, I believe in the American story because it is my story. So I just want to give you that closing word on not just sort of balancing that tightrope of breaking barriers of gender, but also culture, race, geography, so much of it.
So I want to say something about Navya and Anju and then close the show. You just heard Navya talk. And I'm listening to her talk and say at that young age, for her to be so poised and so articulate and so just sounds so professional, just says to me that women have come a long way. People like Navya are now going to emerge on the world scene in profound ways. And we're all going to be looking at them and saying how proud we are. And Angie's going to have a lot of people to invest behind. Because she's right. Today, less than 3% of VC funds go towards women founders. But if we have more of the Navya Nandas and her team, Anjula is going to have more people to invest behind. Because now you have a venture capitalist who can corral money to invest behind founders. Because the problem is the VC community has not had too many women making decisions about who to invest. Anju is one of the very, very few. So I think we're seeing bonds form that portend good things for the future. Now let me give you my last word. I want to say that I'm proud of where I was born, the democracy that I was born in. I'm proud of the democracy that made me who I am. But I will say one thing. For an immigrant woman from India to come and reach the pinnacle of success in another country, that can only happen in the United States. This is still the most open, the most welcoming country with a tremendous meritocracy. So I want to make sure that all of you understand that my story is a story that originated in India, that reached its pinnacle in the United States, a country to which I'm deeply grateful. I'm grateful to India for my foundation. I'm deeply grateful to the United States and the people here that gave me all these opportunities. Basically, the world's largest democracy and the oldest democracy made me who I am. So it's been a privilege being part of this program. It's been an amazing journey. I now can reflect back and say it was an amazing journey, tough at times, but an amazing journey all the same, made richer by the fact that my family and my kids all, were part of this journey. But I also met extraordinary people like Anj and Navya, who I can call friends, mentees, the future of the world, whatever it is. So it's been a hell of a journey, Barkha.
And thank you for writing the book, because for those who don't know you, some of us have had the privilege, Indra, of knowing you, but for those who don't know you, it's really important that the possibility of what your life represents is something that more and more young women believe in, that it is possible, right? That it is possible to dream big, and to make it happen, and to make it happen on the strength of your hard work, your talent, and your passion. And really, I've loved this conversation. Thank you, Anjula and Navya, and thank you, Indra.
Thank you.
It's been lovely. And if you haven't picked up your copy yet, do pick up a copy of Indra Nooyi's memoirs. It will be worth every page that you read and more. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.